Welcome to Dirty Pretty, the space where we own our feelings, honor our experience, share unfiltered truths, and talk shit, all through a lens of love. Today, I am oozing with gratitude, love, and deep indebtedness to our guest, somatic and spiritual teacher, facilitator of transformation, writer and host of the Everything Belongs podcast, Madison Morrigan. Madison uses self-inquiry, emotional alchemy, and embodiment to guide people back to self-belonging, full expression, and living your liberation. The juicy conversations facilitated by Madison cut through the BS and go straight to the heart where possibility lives. She is the only one-on-one coach that I've worked with for the last, I don't know, forever. And these past few years has steadily walked with me through the darkest period of my development, operating on the philosophy that there is nothing wrong with you and yet everything wrong with the programs you're operating out of. Madison encourages all to find their rhythm and dance with life. Welcome.
That was so nice to hear.
It's all you.
Thank you for sharing about your experience with me. We've had such a, unique long-term connection, and the gratitude extends both ways. Like, what a privilege to walk with you through these past couple years.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I think something that I like to also really shout from the rooftop about coaches that I think maybe sometimes often gets overlooked is that you can have a really long-term relationship with a coach. It doesn't have to be like, sometimes you are just going in for a specific thing and you really want to just root it and dig in and like clean that air out or just get some healing around it or whatever it is. But I am truly indebted to Madison. She has really helped me find myself and kind of feel like it's okay in the mess. It can be magical at the same time, and you can fall apart and pick yourself back up. And, so thank you. Thank you for helping me realize like, it's okay, even though I feel like I'm on like a roller coaster, like, like holding
Yes.
on. It's like, just lean into it, lean into it. So thank you very much.
Thanks for saying that.
Of course. So I know you in some capacity or another, as you said, and I said, we've had like a nice long-term relationship as far as coaching is concerned. But if you were, tuning into this and you weren't you, what would you want someone that's tuning into this and hearing all of this about you and getting ready to really dive into who you are, what you do, why you do it? What would you invite people to know about you?
Oh my goodness, what I invite people to know about me. Um, I'm gonna honor myself. And so it's like relate with caution. Because I'm not gonna stay the same. And something's gonna be the same, right? But I'm not gonna stay the same because as we get closer to our truth and as I get closer to my truth, like things change. And so I invite people to relate with me in a fluid way because that's what it's like to be honest about being a person.
Yes. And thank you for saying that. That's something, coaching with you really invited me to. And the way that I term that is like morphologic, being dynamic, being multifaceted. And something that I found permission in our work together and just, growing through life, that you really encourage and I find tremendous value in is I love that relate, with caution, but this idea of not static, you're not going to be this one and done personality forever. And the thing that I hear in that I hear as an invitation for people is like, be open to being disappointed about what you don't know, but also surprised at the same time, right? It doesn't have to be if something isn't figure outable, that it's unrelatable. And so I really hear you
Yes.
inviting people to be chaotic.
Yeah. And to be emergent, I think something I've observed in relationship is, right, we're so used to relating to people in roles and in fixed identities. And if you're on this journey that, you're on and that I'm on, and probably a lot of your listeners are on, it's scary to be shedding parts of ourselves and old identities. And it could be scary in our relationships to be relating to someone who we can't quite pin down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, there's a constant, for me, and that constant is I'm going to honor my truth, whatever emergent truth that is. I think it's important to note that like that means disappointment and actually having to relate and not just be like, oh, these are the boxes that we're in and we're going to continue in this way. Because wow, that's so boring. And just
Yeah.
you understand.
Yes. Yes. It's that is, essentially what Dirty Pretty is for me, right? It's the things that you expect and the things that you don't expect and letting things hit you off guard a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that that is a really important aspect to point out about coaching too, right? Is one of the things I say to people all the time is like, I don't know what's right for you. That to me is not what coaching is. Coaching isn't I
Yes.
show up and tell you what your prescription of humanity is. That
Hmm.
that's not what it is for me. But also, I like to reserve that right as a coach as well. Right. To let people know my perspective could change, how my business function changes, right? All the time. And so I really here, like you said, encouraging people to live their liberation, which is something I know I said in the intro, but I pulled from your website, right? And I hear you encouraging people to just be loose with it. And yeah, you'll have your hard lines wherever they are at that particular
Hmm.
moment in time. But there's a lot of times where I'm like, I don't even know what I want today. I don't even know what I feel when I wake up. It kind of sometimes it can hit you hard. It can be jarring.
Yeah.
I'm in Vegas right now and on the way uh, to Vegas, being in the airport is something that gives me anxiety. It just gives me a lot of anxiety. And there's long lines and there's things that go on. So you really work through that anxiety, at least I have to, because I always worry about missing a
Hmm.
flight, no matter how early I am. But
Same.
as we were getting to the gate, something happened and I lost my shit. Like I lost my shit. And my husband's name is Scott, you know that, for those listening. His name is Scott. And I wouldn't say I projected it onto him, but afterwards, after we landed and everything, I realized like, oh, I didn't need to perform that way. I was upset and I was taking it out on him. And in that moment afterwards was like, okay, I can acknowledge that. And now I can take some action on that if I want to, right? Like that's not someone that
Hmm.
I want to be all the time, but
Yeah.
it just happens being a human being. And I hear that as well, right? Like, don't expect me to be sage, wisdom, Oracle Shannon all the time. Because
Yeah.
sometimes, I always say to people, like, crazy lives here, but I embrace that. And I sometimes
Yeah.
hear you saying things like that too, right? Like, I can be a petty bitch, right? Like, I hear you saying things like that too, like welcoming it, which is why I assume,
Hmm.
you created that podcast, Everything Belongs.
Yes. And I love what you said about talking shit. I'm like, because, as spiritual people, we often don't let ourselves love talking shit. I know you're a Gemini, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, like I have a Libra rising, like talking shit can be fun. And like, I feel like I tried to, perfect myself in a certain way to like remove all of these like human things about me. And instead, it's like, how can I just relate to what is? And what is I got this really interesting character of a personality, and resisting that made me extremely neurotic. But embracing the neurosis somehow makes me more sane.
Yes, yes. And so for those that are watching this and are maybe not at a place, because I know I wasn't always, and I hear a little bit about what you're saying, and if not, correct me. But like I wasn't always at a place where I could be like, that wasn't cute. Let's keep it moving. Right.
Yeah.
And really make permission for the fact of like, I allow for there to be error in this model. Like this model leaks, this model gets upset, this model
Yeah.
isn't perfect, right? And that's
Yeah.
what I hear you saying is inviting people to understand that trying to perform that perfection is what makes you neurotic. If
Yes.
you embrace that, then it just kind of gets to be a part of your development and your humanity.
Yes, exactly. I wrote a piece on my Substack about being neurodivergent. And there's a line in it that I wrote that says, I became neurotic and self obsessed as to not seem so. And I think a lot of us do this who are spiritually inclined, oriented towards therapy or personal development, whatever, whatever the way in was for folks.
Sure.
And in that journey, we become so self aware that self-awareness to rid ourselves of our imperfections actually is what makes us neurotic and self-obsessed.
Mm.
And so it almost is like the mind became so enlarged, like, this big bobblehead in some sort of way where I couldn't even integrate or relax my body around the things I was seeing to be able to digest them. And I became really like, I mean, for me, it was concerned about being good enough. That was really the motivation, but it was under this like spiritual self-help guise of like, I'm getting better. I'm perfecting myself. I'm fixing the things that are wrong with me. And it actually just made me like extremely self-obsessed and really neurotic. And it hurt like all of my relationships. And so
Mhm.
I've been living into this new way of like, how do I just relate to what is with a soft body? And I'm drawing from my teachers and from Red Hawk, the self-remembering book from Red Hawk, of like, how can I observe what's happening without judgment, without trying to change it, and with a soft body, so
Mhm.
that just by the observation of it, something different could happen. In my mind was like, that's definitely not going to be enough because there's a lot of problems in here and I need to fix it. You know? But I have found that in doing that, my body knows how to digest the experience. My body knows how to regulate and to heal. And so that I've grown over time in trust that, like, you know, I tried my hardest to change me and I couldn't do it. And so I might as well just surrender to God because they made me this way for some reason. And I might as well honor the design because I can't fix it.
Yes, I appreciate that because I think that people think that it's like something you arrive at, like being who
Mm-hmm.
you are is something that you arrive at. And again, it goes back to what you said initially, which is almost like this continual development of turning the page of like, what's going to be on that page, right? And letting it be surprising and also letting it be what I guess I would say is like relaxed, not so tense.
Yeah.
Right? Because what I also hear you saying is like you were holding on to try and course correct yourself, that it almost sounds like you were actually holding on to those elements of you because your body wasn't soft. It was tensing, it
Right.
was ripping, it was clinging, it was attached to that. I gotta correct it, I gotta correct it, I gotta correct it. And by
Yeah.
clinging to it, you actually got further from that sense of ease. I feel like I hear you're saying you were trying
Yeah.
to hold, not you were trying to like attain, let me get ease. Let me just go and buy ease and pull it off the shelf.
Yeah. Right.
Right? Like, I hear you talking about embodiment, of like,
Yes.
how does Madison embody Madison? Right? And that's
Yeah.
so trippy.
Should be easy, right? But it's
Yes.
not.
Yes, exactly. So, Madison, I feel like I've read, and correct me if I'm wrong, like you started on your coaching journey at like 22.
I started my life coach training at 22. I was pretty fresh out of college. So, my undergraduate degree was in interpersonal communication and psychology, which lends itself to coaching. So, it was like I could have just coached with that. But I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do at that age. And I was just like, I was working at a spa. I was thinking about maybe becoming a sex therapist. I was like, do I get my master's degree? That at that age I was also married, and so my ex-husband was in school and we just couldn't afford to both be going to school at the same time.
Sure.
We were living in the poverty line, and so I was like, okay, I'll just get a job and kind of just feel into what it's going to be. My parents weren't necessarily like, they didn't think I needed to go to college. There wasn't a whole lot of talk about the future and about ambition necessarily. They're just like, do what you love, work hard, you'll figure it out.
Hmm.
And so I was just I was waitressing, I was doing all these odd jobs, and eventually I was like, oh, I think basically through going to a healer, I was like, I think I'm more interested in helping people orient towards the future than the past. Like that kind of excited me more. And
Yeah.
I originally leaned into like nutrition coaching, and I was like, that's so fun. But I knew at the core it wasn't about food. It was about relationship to things, a relationship to food, relationship to self. And so, yeah, I did the wild thing of being like, I'm going to be a coach at 23. And then
Yeah.
I did. So,
Yeah. So how old, I mean, if you don't want to answer this, you don't have to
yeah.
answer it, but like, how old are you now?
I will be 33 in August, so I'm not sure when this comes out, but my birthday is August 27th, and I'll be 33.
Happy birthday early. It's going to come
Thank
out.
you.
This will be airing in July. So the reason why I'm asking this, like tying this all together, the listeners are like, what does this have to do with anything? Um, is that I think that sometimes people feel that they are at a certain age, and so they should be something already, right? I should already
Yeah.
be calm. I should already be embodied. I should already be convicted. I should already have my career path picked out. It should all be something, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the reason why I asked that question is because I want people to understand that you're going to be 33. You started at 22. This has been a sizable journey that you have were in the
Yes.
beginning. Almost sounds like it's going to be for the rest of your life, right? This is not something like,
Yeah.
again, you're arriving at a destination and now you're done. You can just sail through the rest of your life. You got beyond that poverty, and now it's just like, woo, I know everything, right? So
I
That is
wish.
right. That's right. It would be that great, right? If again, if you could just pick it off a shelf and be like, I'm going to be this person now, I'll wear this forever, and this is the meat suit I'll be, right? This is the
Yes.
character I'll be. I love that you use that word. So I want to share that because I think that, I work with a lot of people that are maybe advanced 50 years of age, and they're changing
Yeah.
careers and they're changing their lifestyle. And you mentioned that you were married before, you're not married now. And then a lot of different things have changed. And so, out of all of the things that you could have chosen to do for your life path, and you've mentioned a lot of things, you're working with different healers, I talked about being a somatic, healer in the intro. Why do you think that you've wound up here? Right? You said all these
Mm,
sex therapists, like it could have been all of these different things. And from your standpoint, now that you've had this time period to look over the last 10 or 11 years, I'm assuming,
mm,
there's been some introspective and some kind of like review of like, oh, this path or this lily pad led me here. Why do you
yeah.
feel like you've landed where you are?
Mm, yeah, I love this question. And just before I answer it, I also want to say, isn't it interesting that we can be in our 50s, 60s, 70s making a life change, 20s, 30s, 40s making a life change, and we think that it's always the wrong time to be doing it?
Sure.
Like there's like
Yeah.
a reason in every decade of our lives. Like I'm too young, I'm too old, I have kids. It's too late, it's too soon, right? Like I have a wonderful young woman that I mentor in her mid 20s, and she's in a divorce, and she's like, I'm just too old. It's too late for me, And I'm like, no, you know. And I'm still so young too, but sometimes I will have those thoughts, and so my career path, I think, in some ways happened early for me, if we are comparing to what's most likely to happen for folks. And so
Yeah.
I'm just speaking to that because I've heard there's a tendency for comparison of like, oh, well, you found your thing at this age, or, and it's like, oh, like we are all on a journey following our life path, and it's going to look so many different ways for each of us. And
Mhm.
I think for me, the simple answer, which I think is the most true, is I just feel like I've always been following my golden cord. That's like kind of what I've always said is like life speaks to me so boldly in so many synchronicities. Before we even started recording, I was mentioning the cat in my yard, and there's a really a lot of symbolism for me there. And I've always paid attention to just like the things that like I have to do, and it doesn't really even feel like there's a choice, but it's like choose the path or self-abandon are basically the choices.
Sure.
And whenever I've chosen to self-abandon, my body gets really loud. Like life is loud to me. And so I don't know if people are interested in human design. I am a 4-1 in human design, which is like the fixed fate is what
Mhm.
they call it. And it does feel that way to me. Like it feels like I'm on a path that is like I'm just following the cues, and I'm kind of along for the ride.
Mhm.
And so I feel like my role is paying really good attention to cycles and really good attention to the cycle of desire and inspiration and the cycle of closing and ending. And that lends itself to a lot of sadness and grief, to be honest, because I haven't been able to find things that are like, oh, this is my path and it will be this forever. Like I look at my friends who like they got married in their 20s and they have kids and they just settled into this life. And I'm like, wow, that's just so not my path. And I'm so happy for you. And I really used to envy that and think something was wrong with the way that I am oriented, but I'm really learning to trust it. And I think the more like psychological perspective would be like I chose this path because I was seeking healing for myself.
Yeah.
And so the career shifts and the ways my work has deepened and changed over the last decade, because it certainly has, all of it has changed as a result of me finding something that I think works better
Mm.
and takes it deeper, right? Like the somatic work, for example, I wasn't always, well, I'll pause. The first practitioner I saw was an energy worker that worked with kinesiology.
Mhm.
And I'd always danced and I'd always done martial arts. So the body aspect was always there for me. But I didn't lean into practicing that with my clients at first.
Mhm.
I think
Like, yes, I can attest to this.
Yes, I wasn't doing that at first
Right.
in my
Right.
work. It was very mental and story based. And because of my history with indoctrinated myself into evangelicalism and it was, I was so curious about belief system and how belief shapes our actions. And
Mhm.
so I kind of look at how the things I was interested in and what kind of captured my attention became the thing I became masterful at. And
Mm.
then I was able to offer that to the world. And then over the last couple of years, my own healing work was basically like, I'm not going to heal unless I get into the body. Like I had done every kind of therapy, like except for somatic work. And I have a lot of early attachment and early childhood trauma that is precognitive. And so when I realized that there are parts of like our bodies and parts of our brain that cannot be accessed through words and language, and realize that my own traumas and imprints of harm were living there, I just again became fascinated. So in some ways, it's like my fascination around what works is the thing that kind of evolves the work itself. And I was gratefully invited to be a part of a shamanic practitioner group by this wonderful elder in my community. She's 80 years old, practicing therapist for, I mean, she's 80, so 50 years, 60 years, and has been a shamanic practitioner for over 30. And so like just following those interests, it continues to surprise me. I'm like, in the thought that like, right, whenever I was trying to manage my life, it never went quite well. Like as if in some ways, as if I knew what was best for me. Like I like to say, like, we know what's best for us, but sometimes we don't. Like sometimes life knows what's best for us. And so I'm just trying to be in right relationship with like following my truth and listening to life. Something in between there. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, absolutely. There's so many things that you said that I love, and that will happen with Madison. There's like so many, it's just, I call them brain babies, like little golden nuggets that blow off of her lips that are just like
Brain
really,
babies.
really wise. Like you're just very wise. And so something that I want to make sure and hit on first is, so anybody's watching this and maybe are or listening and totally out of range with what somatic healing is. Can you give them like a bite-sized version of like, here's
Yes.
what that would mean for you?
Yes. So soma just means body.
Mhm.
And so somatic therapy or somatic coaching or somatic trauma resolution is working with the body. And what I
Mhm.
would say is the modality that I utilize, we're looking at threat response. And so it's actually very rare in sessions with clients. I'm like, tell me about your trauma. Like we're not really doing that. What we're
Sure.
looking for is waves of threat response that are incomplete, that often will mistake as personality. People will be maybe looping, this is me, looping in a flight response,
Yep.
thinking that I just am fast and I just move on quick and it's life is just happening. And it turns out, because of early imprints, and this can go back, right? My birth was early. I was suction cupped out of the womb with forceps, right? And with a suction. And so if we think back to like the earliest imprint of what it was to be a person, it doesn't matter if you're ready or not, you're being suctioned out. And that, as woo as it might sound to people, actually gets stored in the body as an imprint of how it's going to be a person.
Sure.
And so was I traumatized by that? I don't like to use that word because it wasn't necessarily traumatic. I don't remember it. I don't have negative self views of myself because of that, but it was stored as an imprint. And it did tell me that life was going to come too fast. That like I always had to be ready for being in the middle and never having a beginning and never being able to prepare. And so that's just how I lived.
Yeah.
And so that we think of trauma and we think of like horrible things that happen, but threat responses can happen just from life occurring,
Yep.
and threat responses are human. They're actually appropriate. We want to be able to run away from danger. We want to be able to escape. We want to be able to fight if we can. We want to be able to use our people pleasing skills to get out of a dangerous situation. And we want to be able to play dead if we need to, right? Like these are all extremely advantageous responses. We just don't want to get stuck there.
Sure.
And so many of us are like, why am I so good in my relationships, but I just can't get my business started? Oh, well, maybe there's a freeze regarding showing up in the business. And we don't have to go digging into the past necessarily to be looking at where those responses are coming up and how to complete them. So I'm very rarely asking someone, tell me all of the horrible things that have happened to you so we can dig and dig and dig into them. We're really likely to be working with looking at where threat is showing up now. And if we're helping those threat responses complete, we come back to a sense of resonance or, just openness to reality where we're not having to, brace or run or hide or fight against life. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a simple way of putting it without being like, and then we're going to dive into your deepest, hardest life traumas,
Yeah.
you know?
So would you then say that somatic is really trusting your nonverbal internal cues? Is because I feel like I'm hearing you say that, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yes. Yes. And we're not trusting them as inherently true, right? I think a lot of people fear going into the body because, well, one, we're in a puritanical society that says your body is like evil and needs to be controlled and you can't trust your feelings.
Sure.
But also there's the flip side of that where we're like, if I hear something from my body, if my body's having an experience, that must be the truth. And that can be very scary as well,
Hmm.
because especially if we have like early attachment stuff, our body can be telling us connection is dangerous.
Oh yeah.
And so if we're like, oh, I'm just listening to myself and going to distance, 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 well, that's going to bring us away from what we want. It's
Mhm.
familiar, but it's not optimal. And so what we're doing is we're listening for waves of experience and we're building capacity to soften our body and witness those waves so that they complete. And then we come to a place of clarity. So we're
Mm.
letting the body have an experience. I like to, if anyone's ever done, ceremonial mushrooms or any kind of psychedelic, we don't have to take all of that so literal. You have an experience and then the experience ends.
Mhm.
And then you integrate the things that you've, received or saw or learned. And in the work that I do, it's very similar. We don't tell stories about what's happening. We let it finish happening and come back to like, oh, I feel clear and open and, engaged with life and curious again. And now I can begin to digest maybe what that meant if it's
Mhm.
even needed. Sometimes it's like, oh, well, that's over. And I don't need to really talk about it anymore. Which, for those of us who spent so much time in coaching or therapy talking about all of our problems for so long, like, what a relief.
Yeah. Thank God that's over. Yeah.
I know. And it becomes like, I can tell those stories, but I'm not trying to get something out of the telling it anymore. I'm not trying to figure it out anymore. I can just see that that happened. I
Mhm.
know it's in the past and I live here now in the present. And isn't that what like all of the great teachers have been trying to help us do, is to come back to now?
Yep.
And so whenever I say imprint, it's like we're resolving those imprints so that we have the ability to be here now, because we can try to grind our way and grit our teeth in meditation to be here now. But if there's old imprints that are telling us it's still the past, like good luck,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know?
And I appreciate the way that you're describing this, because going back to what we were talking about earlier of like the amount of time you have invested in being yourself, right? That's what it's just embodying whatever Madison is from moment to moment, right? That's to me what coaching is, right? Just the embodiment of like, and then I'm this person now, and then I'm that now, and then I'm this. It does sometimes take time.
Yes.
However, that imprint can last as quickly as a moment. And so that's
Yes.
the thing I love about somatic healing is that I can have a moment where I am like a 5 alarm fire. I should probably be locked away from people. I am out of my head, angry, raging on the inside, right? And then noticing that feeling is having a conversation with that feeling, not making it more than it is, unless that's required for that particular moment, right? In order to be with it, to complete with it, to give it volume, to give it validity. But it can be a split
Hmm.
second. It can be like, I am unreasonably angry right now. And then
Yeah.
having the conversation and saying, but like, I don't love that for me. Like, that's not the vibe I want right now. So like, I understand I'm mad, but I'm also choosing not to be angry. And I think that that's the thing that people sometimes maybe have a misunderstanding about coaching is the word I'll use.
Mm.
Or therapy for that matter, any sort of healing, right? It should be long because my wounding is so deep and embedded and layered and compounded, and I'm a crazy person. It's going to take a long time, right? Like you said.
Yeah, yeah.
But sometimes it can be as quick as a moment to be like, I talked about being in the airport, having that moment where I came out my face of my husband. It was a compounded experience that was actually related to something else. I figured that out later and was like, okay, let's keep it moving. I don't need to continue to be mad for the rest of this flight. Right. And I think
Yes.
that that is a very often left out part of healing and doing any sort of self-development work is that it doesn't necessarily mean you have a, let's say, a 9-month coaching contract with someone, or you invest in therapy and you're like, well, this is going to be a long haul. And
Yeah.
you prepare yourself for like, it's going to be forever because I'm exceptionally fucked up or whatever the story is
Yeah.
in your head,
Aren't we
right?
all exceptionally fucked up? We're always the worst ones. We're
Exactly.
always the one with the most wounds.
Yes, I'm the ugliest on the inside. Nobody wants to see what's under here, right? Like
Yes.
perfectionism. But I really appreciate you bringing this up because I hear it's like a connection as far as a conversation. What am I feeling? What am I going through? And it doesn't have to be this long drawn out experience.
Yes. And I'm also hearing like years of work that you've done gave you the capacity for it to be a moment. And I
Sure.
think that that's what's really interesting is it can be a moment. And sometimes it takes time as those imprints are unwinding. And then the work we get to do is so much less about healing and digging into the past as it is becoming more available to embody spirit and to be open. And so I continue to see my own practitioner. I mean, like I see a practitioner once a month or every other week, depending on availability. And it's so much less around like, let's talk about the past that it used to be a lot more like that. And
Yeah.
now it's like, so I'm getting to experience what I might call blueprint or essence and
Mhm.
gaining capacity for more of that. And so I do think there's a point where like we're still going to have stuff that comes up, and sometimes even ancestral. Like once we are working with our own stuff, sometimes ancestral stuff wants to come through if we choose to work with that. But also, if we think about, I like to think about my body as a microcosm of the macrocosm, right? Like we are a mirror of the world we're living in. And the world we're living in is really in a lot of danger, and there's
Mhm.
a lot of difficulty happening. And so if I'm not so concerned with personalizing all the things that are coming up for me, I this is going to sound maybe weird to some people, but I maybe could create room to digest pieces of the imprint that are in the collective
Yeah.
that could move through. I don't think we have to do that, but I'm curious about it. Like, right, if I am one person in this macrocosm and the world is burning and it's very scary, the things that are happening, I could then relate to those things and maybe digest some of what's happening here,
Mhm.
and that could free up more room for more life force and more beauty, because that's, we're not just resolving these imprints just to, we're not doing this just to focus on the past. We're doing this to be like, okay, and now what's possible?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I don't have any scientific data if that's true, but I tend to see it as true that some of us who are really sensitive will digest things on the behalf of ancestors of the collective. And I don't want to say we have to do that, because some people will hear that and be like, oh, yeah. And then, like, I will take on the load of my ancestors. I will take on the
Right.
load of the collective.
Right.
And that's not what I mean as much as everyone has to do their own work. That is true. I can't do my work for my mom. She has to
Mhm.
feel her own grief. And if I can understand and not be in a difficult relationship between us, what I'll say is I've done really powerful sessions where I'm watching things in my lineage be freed up because I'm no longer re-engaging that old pattern.
Yes.
And so we are a fractal, and I'm like, no, I'm too deep. I'm like, oh
I know.
no,
I love
I've
it.
gone here. If I am a fractal of the whole, how I relate to reality and the energy I let flow through me does impact the whole somehow. Not that it's my responsibility, not that I'm a martyr to that. I can engage in that in choice, but I do think that we can do a lot more for the collective by doing our own work first and then seeing what new possibilities want to come through. I'll stop now because I'm going to get weird if I don't stop talking. I'm already there, but
I hope you do. I love weird Madison. That's my favorite. As you're talking about this, I'm hearing the thread of what you said earlier, which I really loved, and I was really excited to kind of loop this back in, is when you said like I'm finding ways to do it better, because I think
yeah.
that can hit people really, really hard, and they can take it really personally. It's like, oh, so like you're doing it better than me, and it's like maybe I am. I might be. I
I
might
don't
be.
know.
Right, right, exactly. And it's more towards like finding things that you feel worked better for you according to your understanding of how you're living and processing life.
Yes.
And sometimes we get stuck up on that high point of like you're comparing, you're judging, and it's like no,
Mm,
bring it down a little bit to see that we're just all human. We're all contributing to
yeah.
a larger energy. And so how much of the healing work that you do, and I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but I'm hearing it in
Yeah.
there. People that maybe watch this and hear things like energy, and it's just where they are in their development and they're immediately repelled, right?
Yeah.
I was at that place so many times in my development, really like had a chip on my shoulder about it too, like energy, so woo, like all that shit, right?
Hmm.
But how much of the work that you do would you say is rooted in empathy?
Mm. As in, like me as a practitioner having empathy, or the client learning to experience empathy?
So I would say both, right? As the practitioner who's kind of like holding space, right? And kind of walking with people through their own experience,
Yeah.
empathy, but then also through your own human moments where you're a part of a collective experience, holding your end of what I hear is accountability to, right?
Yeah.
Not only the experience you want to have living, but like what you want to contribute to what people
Hmm.
come in contact, again, using the word energy. But like to me, when people come in contact with me, I really think deeply about the kind of energy I want them to suck up like a piece of bread with amazing sauce. Like, yum, I want some of that. Right.
Yes.
So both ways, right? I am curious of how much of it do you think to get out of that woo space for people that are just not
Yeah.
there might be rooted in empathy.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Well, first I want to say that like what I mean by better is efficient. And I have just found that like we are ready for certain modalities at different times. And this is why we need practitioners of all kinds. And what I found whenever I say better is I want the work to work quickly because we're suffering.
Sure.
And a lot of us are suffering unnecessarily, really trying to heal. And so, if the work I offer can have the most potent dose of the medicine at the right time, the right modality at the right time, then that person will suffer less. And we all are going to suffer, but I mean unnecessary suffering, because there's necessary suffering, and that's real too. And so, whenever I say better, I mean like I want to offer the most efficient piece of work based on the tools that I've found, knowing that everything I did for my own healing and everything I've offered was also perfect and needed for my development and my client's development at that time. And so if someone's like, I don't do any somatic work, is what I do still good enough? It's like, yes, because there are people who can only receive that right now.
That's
And
right.
that might be as far as they're ever able to go. And some people might start with somatic work and then work their way to the other end, right? So we need so many different kinds of healers. Bless all the healers who are doing this work. Regarding empathy, it's interesting because I've found that I was very enmeshed and codependent in my life. And a lot of that was a wrong relationship with empathy, like an unhealthy relationship with empathy, where I wanted to rescue people from their experience of suffering and even necessary suffering. And so I was merging a lot of the times and having a sense of confluence with my clients, where because I was having too much empathy, I wasn't able to sit back in my seat in the role I was in and differentiate their stuff from mine. And when that happens, we are in transferring dynamics, we're in projecting dynamics, we're often repeating our own past with clients. And so it's not exactly empathy, but I thought it was, which is why I'm making a slight
Distinction.
distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah, because until I learned to differentiate myself from other people, which I felt was unempathetic, I felt it was unempathetic to not fully merge with their experience and then to make myself exactly what they needed. And
Yeah.
sometimes what people need is actually empathy is, can I look at this with you? Can I come alongside and look with you, not jump into your shoes or wear your shoes and be in your body and then merge myself with you, but can I see it from your perspective? And that doesn't require me, I'm now realizing, to lose my sense of self and my perspective of the situation, but I can have deep emotional and cognitive understanding without abandoning myself. And to me, that is empathy. And so I think a lot less about how I want clients to feel because I'm so good at managing how people feel that that's actually kind of slippery for me. I'm so good at being like, I want to create this experience for them. And I have found that I can be so forceful with what I think is right that then imposes what I think they need onto them and doesn't let their body tell the truth. It's like, here's my diagnosis and what I think you need, and here's my opinion and my perspective, and here's the feeling I think you should have. And more of like, oh, can I trust that life is trying to move through this person? Can I look at their situation with them and stay present and open to whatever's coming through them, because I trust that they have the capacity to digest that experience. And let's just say maybe it's overwhelming. Then my role as a practitioner would be to be attuned to that and to help them back off from it so it doesn't blow out their capacity. And so it's like, it's empathy, but it's so different than the way I used to do it, because I would just give people whatever I thought they wanted. And that, I mean, think about a parent who gives a child whatever they want. It's not a healthy relationship. That's enmeshment.
Okay.
And so I've really had to differentiate enmeshment from empathy, which has been like the most excruciating process of my entire life. Not as a practitioner necessarily, but as a person. Like, I don't know how into astrology you or your people are, but I have a Pisces moon at the critical degree, which is like the final degree, which they say is like a karmic placement. And you're just going to learn all the things that you finally need to learn about that placement. And my son is also in the 12th house, ruled by Pisces. And so it's very like, boundaries don't exist and you will merge with everyone. And so this lifetime's really about that for me. So yeah, I don't know if, I think we might see it differently. You are so much more, I think you feel more deeply than me. I really do. I think that you feel so deeply in a way. I think that's your magic, is like you are so able to go to the deep places with people. And so I actually think that like your capacity for empathy is a different kind of empathy than I have. And it's very special about you that you're just not afraid of any of the places. You're really not. You're really not.
Wow, what a compliment. Geez. Okay, I'm just letting that soak in for forever. That is such a nice gift to be able to see me through you. So thank you for that. Yeah, and I'm glad that you answered it the way that you answered it. And that's the thing I love about you, Madison, is like you really empowered me through my own body, my own vessel, right? To be able to say, I understand that you're asking me this way, but here's how I'm going to answer it. And that's why I wanted to ask you that question of like, I'm doing it better, because I want people to understand that it's okay for you to have an awareness of what better is for you, right? That's your
Yeah.
development, and that the empathy part of that you answered perfectly, obviously, according to you. But to what I was hearing is there are parts of our development that you're just not going to like. You're going to look at yourself and be like, yeah, I have the capacity to be a bulldozer sometimes, right? Like, I know that I'm very similar to you, where it's like, I can be very, very intense in my perspective. Knowing that about yourself doesn't mean you have to monsterize yourself, which is what I say all the time. Like, you don't have to make yourself this monster of being like, oh, I do these things sometimes, and then tear yourself down and try and like eradicate it and push it out like a pimple. Empathy
It
to
is
me,
what we do, isn't it? We're just like trying to shove it out.
yes, right. And I hear you really championing for people to make space in, everything belongs. Again, pulling that back in as your podcast name. That is what I feel like you embody as an individual. It is just let there be space for all of it. And that includes likes and dislikes.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, to that end, is that something you would say that you maybe dislike about your profession is
Mm,
holding space for that struggle, because you said walking people towards something and then helping them back off of it. Would you say that that's something you like or dislike?
I like it because I personally like living at an edge. And
Yeah.
I think if we're talking about flow state, for example, flow state only happens at an edge where it's almost just beyond your capacity, but you can do it. You can hold it. And it takes, have you ever been in a yoga class like that where you're like, you're really in a flow, your brain doesn't have room to think about anything because you're just staying with your edge? Like
Mhm.
we want to lean into that. We may want to back off, but I really enjoy like leading edge conversations. I really enjoy like seeing what my capacity is. I've had to learn to back off because I actually can be a blow past the capacity person.
Yes.
And, again, with the fastness of my nature, I'm like, okay, I need to learn to go, kind of tidily in and out. I like that. What I don't like is the constant moving past that I think traditionally coaching is trying to force people into a becoming
Mm.
despite wanting to cocoon. And so I like the, if people are watching, you might see me just the in and out movement, the industry itself as a critique on the industry. I think therapy as an industry, I'm way overgeneralizing, but I'm going to be rude, is like, let's stay in and coddle this and lick our wounds for the rest of time. And I think coaching as an industry is let's blow past your capacity for the rest of time. And I think both of those things, if you've experienced, either one where it's like we're licking our wounds and we're just traumatized and we're victims to this, which isn't the point of therapy, but it can happen there. And then coaching where it's constant growth forever and ever and ever. Neither one of those things are sustainable. And so that's why I'm like, okay, it has to be both. And so I'm like, I don't like that we tend to operate in extremes until it becomes unhealthy. I am learning to like balance, but it's not my natural way.
Do you think that just as human beings, that's a byproduct of being human? I think this obviously, which is why I'm saying it. This is why I created this whole conversation, Dirty Pretty, because I
Yeah.
am a big fan of those extremes, like you said, my depth and whatnot. So I can sit in like the crypt
Mm-hmm.
with people and be like, oh, it's as long as it takes. Like it's as long as it
Yeah.
takes,
The
right?
crypt. I love
Right.
that.
Or like the highest of high, like just be up here all very woo and ethereal, not paying attention to any sort of system or structure, just like woo, like whatever.
Right.
But do you feel that that is just a byproduct of our humanity, where it's like we're struggling to find balance because by nature, we are just continually evolving from the minute that sperm and that egg are like, bam, like it's just continual evolving. And so it almost to me
Yes.
sometimes feels like it's a push against our natural instinct to find balance. And that I think is where that empathy
Mm.
piece comes in for me, where it's like, we're all doing it. It's like that commercial where they have the dollars, like you got to be quicker than that. Like, we all see it, but we don't want to talk about how challenging
Mm.
it is to find balance in a world that is very, very fast, including our own
Yeah.
development. You're one day,
Yeah.
you're this person 1 minute, and then the next second you're on to like some other personality.
Yeah. When I see it for myself, I see it as like I want to be so available for the dynamic range. That's been like a phrase that's been coming to me a lot lately is like I really for a long time thought that I'm like, oh, I'm just an intense person and I want to embrace that. And I am an intense person, but also I can be really slow and also I can be really contemplative. And also I love like going nowhere over the weekend. Like whenever I try to like box myself into even the best qualities about myself or often the worst qualities of myself, it's
Yeah.
so limiting.
Mhm.
And I'm finding like, can I be available for whatever wants to happen next for
Mhm.
me? And that could be like as simple as what wants to happen next is I would love an iced tea after this, right? Like it doesn't have to be that deep. Right? But also I learned from my teachers, Matt and Holly Krebs, and I'm currently doing a yoga teacher training for fun, which is I'm loving it.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm like I don't really plan to teach yoga, but I love to be learning something, and I love to learn from them. So I was like, why not? But we're talking a lot about the three forces in the universe, and there is an affirming force, which is like active. There's a denying force, which is like not just passive, but like it's like death. It's like
Yeah.
lethargic, and then there's a reconciling force, and we actually need all three. And I've been contemplating on the nature of like triangles and the nature of three, right? And even like Father, Son, Holy Spirit, where we have we have this relationship to three that's really interesting, where there's like a mediator between the two extremes. And I'm in contemplation about it. And I think that that's that movement in and out, or active, passive, is like, can I engage with all parts of me and not get stuck at any place?
Yeah.
Because speaking of like imprint, right? Some of us have imprint that are actually more stuck, passive, lethargic. I can't move. I feel dead, right? Like there's like, some of us get stuck in that place. And that is a sign of an imprint that is keeping us out of the full dynamic range. Who is to say how long that tide is going to go, right? Like maybe you need to stay in that place for a while before you kind of come back out into the world and express again. So I'm not one to be like, I don't know anyone's timing, but I know when I listen to myself, when I'm done with an inward moment
Yeah.
and I'm ready to come back out again. And so what I'm getting at is I don't want to be fixed.
Mhm.
I want to be able to follow the whole range all the way through. And we can't be a bright, shining star forever. We need to rest, and we can't rest forever. We need to come out and connect again. And so I have no idea how I even got here, but there's something to that is really important to me right now, where I'm like, I want to be able to be all of it
Yeah. Right.
as me, like through the weird character that I am, can I express all of it?
Yeah. And I also hear that that is just, you know, talking about extremes, talking about rigidities. There's this narrative that I see going on very pervasively in the therapeutic coaching space where it's like, if you have expectations, then like, that's just terrible. It's just a staunch don't have any expectations. But then it's like, sometimes you do need to have expectations. It's like, for me, I
Yeah.
always start contrasting examples. Like if you're in an abusive relationship, that is an expectation I will not tolerate. It is healthy to
Yes.
have, boundaries and limitations and whatnot. I also hear that, you're creating that expectation for yourself. If you meet another human being that doesn't like your multifaceted manic magic at times, you allow for that for the other individual while also holding space for you to allow for all of you
Yeah.
to be manically magical, right?
I
And
love that.
yeah, I say that to my husband all the time. I'm manic, just let it go, just embrace it or whatever, right? It's like one of those moments. I'm undulating. It's like, oh, a roller.
Yeah.
So for somatic work and for, your journey and for the way that you view life, what do you think people considering this work or this path as a profession, what do you think that they should know, given all the things you kind of pulled in with regards to the extremes and the rigidities and kind of allowing them
Hmm.
to your own point, dance within that whole space?
Yeah. Do you mean like as a practitioner or having a healing business?
I would say whatever's coming up for you.
Mm. The having a healing business side of it activates so much of my stuff. Success is important to me. It's like I will have it no other way. That is how it's going to be. And there's a cost to that. And I've paid the price. In some ways, I don't think it's easy to grow a business on the internet doing healing work, despite what all the business coaches will ever tell you. It's not easy to expose yourself to the world and say, like, here's something that's coming from my heart. Do you want it? Like that
Yeah.
is hard to do over and over again. And so facing rejection and facing just like constant change, I mean, that for me, that brings me to a place of intensity that I'm really working on having more balance with. And it's helping me get my need for success in check of like, what does that really mean to me to be successful? That's like a question I have to constantly ask, because I can get away from myself in that striving and that being on. But as a healer or practitioner of this work, wow, like I think I just love it so much. I'm like, what else to say about it other than like, what a cool thing to get to sit with people and to get to know you through this. And then to get to like, I mean, most of our sessions, I don't really talk this much. And so I'm like, wow, how fun to like get to know you and just word vomit everywhere. This is so interesting. Like I'm having so much fun, and it's so much fun to hold space for you. And I get the opportunity to, it's like, which to me shows that dynamic range in our relationship, which is so cool that like we have role clarity when it's time, and we have the ability to flow in and out of a certain dynamic where there's no hierarchy, there's no power dynamic going on. Like what a gift to have that. I love that about this work. The professional public side of this work can get weird.
Yeah.
And I'm always in contemplation about how to do that better because, you know, when you're 23 and you start a business online, you are not thinking about the things that you're thinking about when you're 33 and you have a business online.
Right.
And I have exploited myself, and I've exploited partners, and I've hurt people in the way that I do my marketing, and the way that I'm like, oh, I'm going to talk about this now because this I grew from this experience, but it's someone else's experience too. And goodness, it's like I've learned so much. So yeah. And then like scarcity, you know, like I'm not someone who has ample financial support from a partner or from family. And so, and nor have I ever really. And so I'm really learning to see where that need for success comes from, like a need, a demand to not be abandoned, a demand to not be without. And I'm like, okay, am I at a place where I could soften that a little bit? Like to be determined, but I'm curious about it,
Yeah.
you know?
Like a
So,
continual development, right? I hear you like looking into it with curiosity versus
yeah.
contempt or, constriction or anything that is kind of predetermined or label or fixed, right? Like you said before, fixed.
Yes.
And so I hear that
Yes.
from both sides, it sounds like you're challenged to grow in your tenderness and
Yes.
challenged to be with people in their tenderness. And I hear that like what it's revealed to you about yourself is that there is a commitment that you want to maintain about being tender and your development and your growth and
Mm,
really being loose with that, as well as
mm,
keeping the mindset for other people as well. I hear you really hold
mm,
deep, deep space for people to allow their human experience to be as predictable or unpredictable as it is, but also very tender. I hear that in the work that you do there,
mm,
and I've experienced it as well. You do give a lot of permission for people to be in that manic mess and also wonderful at the same time. And it's nice to see this perspective because number one, I can validate that working with you has been so reassuring and refreshing because getting into this work and working with therapists, there often can be a hierarchical feel to it. Like I am the
yeah.
leader and you are the listener. And being able to like gear shift in and out of that to have like friendly moments, then to have, container moments or space holding moments and development moments and progressive moments and standing still and being reflective moments. You're a very, very good conductor of that experience. And you
Thank
really
you.
held space for it to be like, you can be friends with your clients. You can be friends, like,
Yeah.
because there seems to be this is off-putting approach of their, again, that hierarchy approach. So
Yes.
given these pros and cons, right? Because it's messy. It's a very
It is
messy
messy.
space. And to hold tenderness and mess is where I think humanity at this particular juncture in our life needs it, right? We need to be really honest with the mess that we're making in the world collectively, but we also need to do
Mm.
that by the vehicle of addressing the mess that's within ourselves and being
Hmm.
accountable and tender at the same time.
Mm.
So
Wow.
with both these likes and dislikes, besides money, right? Besides like
Hmm.
you just share it. You're not affluent. You don't come from just like you have a true money tree in your backyard.
I
Um,
wish, but no.
right? Um, why then, besides that, why do you continue to sustain this? Why do you continue to
Mm.
pursue it, knowing that there are going to be days where you feel like you get punched in the mouth and you have to take accountability for hurting someone, and yet also
Hmm.
being accountable for the way you deliver that message was the most authentic way you could do it. How do you
Right.
continue this and sustain it, knowing all its
Mm.
challenges?
Well, I do want to say thank you for observing the tenderness. I think that that is work for me to like really settle into my heart. And this is why like you're someone who lives there so deeply. And I do feel like I come from my heart, but there's often not a lot of, there hasn't been a lot of capacity to feel the tenderness from me, because that would be so scary and like so vulnerable, and I'd have to admit how I've been hurt, right? There's so many guards up, and that like striving for success is a part of the way where I'm like, if I can just be successful and independent, then I don't have to feel anything. And that's just not real.
Yeah.
And so I feel seen in that the capacity for tenderness in me is growing. And that actually is a part of the work that I'm trying to cultivate, is consistent access to my own heart space. That is really important, especially around others. It's one thing alone, it's different in public as a person who other people see, right? Like to be like, I'm hurting and I'm telling people about it. I'm hurting and I'm, like that is an edge for me. So I just want to say thank you for seeing that without me having to be explicit. Again, you see people. And so I feel honored to be seen by you. And your question about why, that's a great question. I love it. I love this work. Like I love getting to have conversations like this. And I really have so much hope for people. And I hope so for myself, and I have so much possibility. I think that is something that I bring, that's a gift of mine, is possibility. And I think that this work creates more options for people, that it doesn't have to be how it's always been. I just see the transformation for people. I see what becomes possible. And I also see it in myself. And so I'm kind of like an evangelist for everything that I love. And so I kind of can't help but do it because I love it so much that I'm like, I want to talk about it because I'm loving it. And also, I'm not good at anything else.
I refuse to believe this.
I'm just like, this is the thing that I've devoted my life to. I am good at other things, but they're all so obscure, right? Like I'm a shit employee. I don't want to work for anyone. I don't care about any other conversations really. And so it's like, this is my hyperfixation. And I feel grateful to have a special interest that has lasted as long as this work has.
Yeah.
Maybe one day that will shift. And I'm like, maybe one day I'll become a painter. Who knows? Like I think about the other possibilities. Pop stars, like I'm aging out of pop star as an option, unfortunately. That would have been number one, but I don't have a singing voice, so sadly. So in dancer, you have to be a little affluent to be able to take enough dance classes to be a professional dancer. So that was off the table. And so it was like pop star, professional dancer, painter, or healer. Ooh. Those are my options, really. Everything else, I'm like, this.
I like all of those. There is that, I don't know the name of it, but there is that paint work that's like paint therapy. So like there could be convergence. Yeah. I was just looking at it. There's like a place in California. I'll have to share it with you, but
I bet there is. Yeah.
I could see
my practitioner is going to school for art therapy. And so I'm like, it does exist. And I incorporate dance into my work where I can. I'm not dancing with clients, but like I host a dance alchemy, a static dance. I'll dance. I'm always dancing on the internet.
Yes.
Being like, here I am dancing again.
There's Madison on her tennis court dancing.
Yes. And so I'm like, I'm doing that anyway. And so I guess I could use it for marketing and be like, this is what I'm up to.
Sure. Yeah. I think like dance is its own language. Dance is, another relatable tool. I think that's why a static dance is a thing, right? So
yes,
I could see you doing all of those things. You could be a backup dancer, who knows?
Yeah.
Right?
Beyonce, give me a call.
It's right. Like we said at the very beginning, there is no reason why at any point in your life you can't pivot and decide like, now I'm going to be this. And if I could say that there is something that I really took away from our work together, and of course I'm still in connection with you, always hold space. Like if I really need a good like digging, I just go back to Madison and she just helps me like sort that shit out. But it's just really inviting whatever's going to be next, right? And now I'm this, and now I'm this, and now I'm this. And I hope that the people watching that get that, and I'm sure they will get that sense from you, because it's such a beautiful permission. Because for the rest of our lives, we're just continuing to learn and grow and absorb, and you're only as smart as you are in that particular moment. And if that next piece of information like helps you develop into your most fullest expression of yourself, that's something I've always taken from my work with you. So thank you for being that advocate in the universe. This is why
Mm,
for me, Dirty Pretty exists. I want people to look at all the sides of themselves and just be like, I'm all the things, like I'm all the colors of the rainbow, right? Um,
yes.
so all of that being said, is there anything before we wrap this up here that you would like to add? It could be maybe you want to expand upon something you said earlier, any final
Mm,
thought, something that you want people to walk away with. What would you like to add before we wrap this up?
yeah. I'm like, wow, I've said so much, and I'm hoping there was a thread between all of it that is coherent for folks. Um,
You're the thread. You're the thread.
yes, and you hold such wonderful space. I'm just like, I feel so delighted to be like, able to share in this way. I host a podcast, obviously. I ask the questions and coaching. I'm not really like projecting all of my opinions out there, but
Right.
I do have them. And so I'm like, thank you for the opportunity because I can talk a fucking lot. And anyone who knows me in real life would be shocked that I'm actually not doing the most of the talking in my sessions because I talk so much. So I'm like, thank you for the opportunity to just broadcast stream of conscious thought. and and also I just love being in connection with you. I think the work you do is so powerful. I think these conversations are so powerful. I love what Dirty Pretty is about. Like when you emailed me the idea, I was like, this is so you. I love the graphic being half black and white and half color.
Thank
And
you.
like you have such a way about like being so multifaceted. Like you are like a kaleidoscope of a person. And it's so beautiful. And it's like I know we keep talking about like, oh, we're changing so much, but also like I've seen over years, 5 years, maybe 6 years alongside you in different capacities. And like you've changed so much, but it's actually just been towards integrity. And so despite there being so many changes, nothing that's real has changed.
Yeah.
It's like the costume may have changed or the preference may have changed, but like Shannon, like the essence is like still the same. And that just I think speaks to just the integrity that you have, which I've gotten to be up close as a witness to, which is so cool. And also, I just like, you're the most fun. Like, the most fun. Like, look at
Wow.
your outfit.
Oh,
It's so
I,
fun.
I'm about to head to a pool outfit, but thank you for that. Thank you for all of that. I'm like, I wanted to be like, is there anything you would like to add about you? And I was not expecting it to be about me. So I super appreciate that. I mean, it's something that I am working on, right? Like that's my
Mm,
own wounding or my own development that I'm working on that I know I went to you for assistance and I go back in time again whenever I get stuck is like, not being like Teflon for compliments. Like it's like sliding off of me or
oh, I
something.
know that about
Right.
me. Yeah.
Yes,
I'm like,
exactly.
where's the receptor where love gets in? I would like to find that and open
Yes.
it a little bit more.
Yes. And I hope that everybody watching this and listening to this lets that happen for themselves too, because I
Yes.
always kind of think whatever comes up in these conversations is whatever is needed in the universe at the time.
Yeah.
And I'm really, really, I don't know if it's like it's synchronistic that we're talking about like body-based experiences, because that to me is how you receive a compliment. Like you said, the receptor, that's a
Yeah.
body-based experience to be like, can I own this beauty about me? Can I own this
Yeah.
tenderness about me? But to all of that end, again, going back to what I said about you is the same. You don't have a cute moment, you come up at your face and you're like, oh, that's not how I want to be, but holding tenderness for that too, right? Not like over glamorizing who you think that you should be in the face of getting compliments, having accolades sent your way, being visualized as
Mm,
this sort of person. It's more like, how do you feel and how can you be with whomever you are in that moment? And so I hope
yeah.
people take that away from this conversation because that to me is what Madison represents in the world. And like you said,
Mm.
it's constantly evolving. Even when I see you doing your like crab walks on like the court and you're dancing and all, I'm like, you're being just so authentic in the moment, however it comes out, however it looks, because you're right. Being visible is super vulnerable because you open yourself up for whatever version of someone else's humanity is going to receive you. That's tenderness. To be with someone that's
Hmm.
like, you suck, and be like, I love that for you, right? That
Yeah. So hard to learn that capacity.
it absolutely is, but you do it with finesse and you do it
Thank
with
you.
flair and you do it while booty tooching, and I love it. I love that. So, what do you have going on? Where can people find you? Give them all the
Mm.
details of how they can have more Madison because I know they're going to want it.
Yes, thank you. So, if you're curious about just like the booty shaking on Instagram, by all means, come join me. It's Madison Morrigan, just my name. And I do, if someone's like, I'm curious to like dip my toe in the waters, I do have a workshop that people can buy on demand. It's called Sacred Sword. It's Shame Alchemy for Full Self-Expression. It's $59, but you can do a sliding scale starting at 15. So if someone's like, I only have 20 bucks, I'm willing to try it. Awesome. I can send you a link for that. You can put it in the show notes. And that gives people kind of like a taste of any one-on-one work we would do. We do some somatic practices in that. And then also I have a 12-month program called The Fortress, and that won't open until winter probably. We're only in the second month of the program right now. So probably November, December, the doors for that will open. If anyone's like, I want to feel it out, I'm curious. Aside from that, I have a podcast. I'm always having interesting conversations, similar to this, but I'm not usually the one who's talking this much. And so I'm interviewing other people who are saying what they think is interesting. But yeah, I'll send you the links and you can pop them in the show notes.
And what about, and if I need to edit this out, you can let me know. But
Mm-hmm.
what about your retreat?
Oh my God. Yes. So I don't know if there will be any spots left because today there are only 3 spots left, which is so exciting.
Sounds so
I
amazing.
cannot believe that. So my dear friend Melissa, she is PhD candidate for how is it called? It's so official, transpersonal somatic psychology. She's a therapist that's been practicing for a very long time. She does somatic work. She's knows a lot about psychedelic medicines, and she's just also a dear friend of mine. I interviewed her on the podcast actually, and by the time this comes out, there'll probably be a couple episodes with her. We have
Cool.
2 so far, and one of them she guides me into this like really intense therapeutic process live for everyone to hear, which was
Wow.
very vulnerable. And the one that we released yesterday is more about her journey, and you'll love her. You're actually very similar, very intelligent. I think you're both 4s on the Enneagram, just like similar in a lot of ways. And she talks about how you are a verb, which is so what you're talking about, of like moment to moment experience of self. And so if anyone's like, oh, this conversation was interesting, my conversation with Melissa was also, it's episode 127. But she and I are like, basically we have we're of the same shamanic background. We have similar shamanic teachers from the same lineage. We both live in the same area. And we're like, wouldn't it be cool to host an embodiment retreat about the elements and do somatic, shamanic, and therapeutic work over 4 days? And I feel so grateful because my teachers, who I mentioned in the episode today, they are letting us use their land. And so
Wow.
people get to come meet my teachers. They're not going to be teaching, but they live there, so they'll be there and be on the land where so much like love and transformation has happened for me. And so there's 14 spots total. There's 3 left as of today. It's the final weekend in September. And so if there are spots left, I would love if anyone's like, this is interesting. What the fuck is she talking about? I want to feel my aliveness. I mean, like, we're going to do movement practices. We're going to make what's called despacho, which is like a fire offering. We're going to do a water offering. We'll do an earth painting, which are all shamanic practices to be in right relationship to the earth and the elements, while recognizing that we also are nature.
Mhm.
And the aliveness is happening within us too. So hopefully, I mean, it's already going to be a really interesting bunch of people. Like you said, like you've been working with me for a long time. I think over half the people coming are long-term clients of mine, some of which I've never met in real life. And so I'm elated.
I'm so jealous.
Maybe next time if it doesn't work this time.
Yes, yes. I wanted to make sure and point that out because the minute the email came through, I was like, oh my goodness, this sounds like just such a cathartic experience, because very similar to how you're describing your retreat, and I'm not trying to infuse words where they're not.
No, you go for it.
I view humanity as just one big reflection of nature. Like,
Yes.
seasons, cycles, that manic mess. Like, I just feel like Mother Nature is
Yes.
constantly saying to us, like, I'm the template. Hello, right? Like, it's just constantly trying to remind us that we are animals, we come from the same vibration, like trees have their own
Yes.
communication system. We have ours. I'm sure that it's going to be full, but send the link over. I'll add it into the show notes. And I'm so
Yes.
excited for you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for coming on and talking, being the voice, allowing it to be, the seat be reversed and you be the person that opens up and we get to just like crack you open and see that like
Mm,
radiating vibrancy that's on the inside of you because
thank
you
you.
radiate from the inside out. And I will say this, and I am not sorry at all, put it up front, is that you're one of the most honorable people in the space. And
Wow.
you conduct yourself with such and look you conduct yourself with such such integrity and time again talking about how difficult it is to be an entrepreneur, let alone in this particular space of healing, which is so needed and challenging and really demanding. Time and time again, when I feel like I lose my faith or I'm looking out into this space and it feels like I don't see myself anywhere in the energy of this and I feel like I want to retreat, I go back into Madison and I'm like, oh yes, here is someone
Mm,
that is like a sister to me, an energy in the world that's like, no, 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 no. Stay true, keep the course, and honor your vibration. So thank you.
mm. I feel like a sister to you as well. And I just thank you. My heart feels like, I'm like, is this receiving? Is the heart the receptor side? I think it might be. But I think it speaks to our ability to not be invested in power dynamics, that this relationship is possible. And so I'm just so grateful. Thank you for saying all of that.
Thank you. And thank you for the space you hold in the world. Thank you for all of you that are watching and listening. I will have all of Madison's information in the show notes. Please go check her out. You will not regret it. And you are already
Mm.
feeling that way, I can just tell. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Be good to yourself for fuck's sake. Live honestly in the dirty pretty of your life and choose to do the next right thing for you. Till next time. Bye.